Hello and welcome to the Science Standards K-12 review for our new Teacher Institute. So glad to have you with us today. And let's go ahead and get started. As far as the QR code to sign in, not requiring that since this is a videoed taped session, so we'll move on. First, I'd like to say welcome. And my name is Mary Belcher. I'm a KVEC instructional lead here at KVEC. So basically, if needing help with certain types of professional development, I would be a person you could contact and I could see what we could do to help you out with that. As far as talking about myself with the science standards, I was a 7th grade science teacher for 14 years. And 2 years I then taught math. So very much loved teaching the science content. And if you were to ask me what was my favorite topic in science, was rocks and minerals. I know that sounds a little bit odd, but definitely was my favorite because I loved how I could incorporate my physical and chemical properties, show physical chemical changes, and how it just really encompassed and could do a lot of things with the kids. And one of my favorite things to do with it was, talk about, could you identify a diamond if you really ran across one? And I'd always share the story of one of the largest diamonds in North America was actually found in West Virginia, which was less than 100 miles away from where I would teach. And so that was always an interesting thing. So I can't remember if it was like the fourth largest diamond or fifth in North America found. So that was always a neat thing to pull in and try to engage the students, I guess you would call phenomenon in today's time. But I want you to think about what your favorite topic is in science and why you like to teach it. Going on to our learning goals, the first thing to talk about as a new science teacher, where do I start? That is something we want to discuss a little bit. Know what my responsibilities are in relation to the science standards and why it matters. A clearer understanding of the standards to get to the rigor of the content. So starting here at the first, you're a new science teacher. Maybe this is your first year teaching. Maybe it's your first or second, but always good to sit and think about what resources do you have in science in your district? What textbooks, digital resources, do you have to give a screener like MAP 3 times a year as a benchmark assessment? So learning what you have available and making sure that that textbook is a high quality instructional resource, and that's something to look at as well. Same thing with your digital resources. There's a lot of things available out there, but just be careful knowing that everything is not high quality or something that is a best practice. So once you've got down what your textbooks are and your resources, and do you have a screener you need to give? Is there a curriculum map or pacing guide, some districts call it, available to you that kind of maps out your whole year to let you kind of have a pacing of how to go with your content? Now, speaking from my own experience, never followed the pacing guide exactly because every group of kids would be different. One group would be stronger in certain areas than others, and I would be able to speed up, and in other areas they would be slower. So I would always have to tweak my curriculum map and realize that it wasn't set in stone. That was not a have to follow exactly, but it kind of helped me to plan for my year, to help me stay on pace to where I would be able to get the content with my students throughout the year. Also, here's an interesting thought: expectation of time allowed for science in my day. If you have a class period and you're departmentalized, that's kind of already determined for you, so you don't have as much to be concerned about with that. But if I am a self-contained kindergarten, first grade teacher, you might want to find out from your principal, from district staff, what is the expectation with science? Because yes, we realize reading, writing, math, yes, priorities, but science is a fun thing that we can utilize in those 2 areas of math and reading, writing. to be able to work with our students so we can have a lot of fun with science. So kind of keeping that in mind of what is the expectation for the science of the day. Sometimes in some elementary schools, it's like you're expected to teach science 9 weeks and social studies the next 9 weeks and then back to science. Just find out from someone on your team or in your school administration what to do there. The other thing is, where do I start, is on the Kentucky Academic Standards for Science. So when you click on this, it's actually going to take you to your science, your KY standards page. And this has your science resources, your current standards that you want to make sure that you're utilizing, and then all kinds of other things that are available for you to be able to access. One is a good one is evidence-based instructional practices. They have actually science-specific things to relate to. You also have the standards, family guides, and resources. It does have all the standards, and I really like how they break it down into parent-friendly language. So that might be something to take a look at another time. There's also the Science Instructional Resources Alignment Rubric. Just some really good things to take a look at and be aware of. I do recommend that you click the plus sign and make sure that you put your name in your school email so that you can be getting the newsletters that come for the standards, so that you're staying up to date and current, and being sure to take a look at those when those come out, because there are things that relate to science and the other content areas in there. So what you want to make sure that you do is go through and review this, take a look at it, and be familiar with this site. Now, those are things to think about, is where do I start? These are great places to start with. Now, why does it matter? Why teaching science? Why would it matter? If I'm a kindergarten, first grade teacher, what's the big deal if I don't wind up teaching it? So I do have this document in your folder so that you can take a look at. And there's also a copy of the PowerPoint in there as well. But when you take a look at this document was created by Kim Fields and modified by myself, Mary Belcher. This takes the disciplinary core ideas, the DCIs, and shows where they're taught at the different grade levels. So if I take a look at Physical Science 1, Matter and its Interactions, I'm going to see that structure and properties of matter is going to be taught at second grade, and so is chemical reactions. But notice it's not taught in kindergarten or first grade, not third or fourth. It does get taught again in fifth, sixth, and seventh grade. So if those kids are not taught that content in second grade, they're not going to get it again till fifth grade. And is that content open for assessment for the fourth grade year? Yes, it is. And so just making sure that you realize that some things that are taught are not taught every year in science, and being aware of that is the part that falls in your grade level, that you realize that it is important and it does have an impact on the expectations for our students of what they're to know at the end of the grade level. Kind of helps you to realize that this is something to be familiar with. So you do have a copy of this document, like I said, in your folder. So you are welcome to print that off and take a look at it. If you go to the Earth and Space Science, if you recall, I said that I liked the rocks and minerals. Well, if you look at seventh grade, what happened when the Next Generation Science Standards came out is everything Earth Science went to sixth grade. So I didn't wind up getting to teach what I enjoyed the most. So that was lots of fun there. But that's just one of those things of, being up to date on what is required, what's the requirement for us to go through and to teach. So that is a document that you have at your disposal. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is a video that was released when NGSS was put out there So just to let you be able to watch it for the next few minutes, but it kind of gives you an idea of the excitement around these standards.
When people are first introduced to the next generation science standards, there's stunned silence. And then there's squirming in the chair, and people start to get antsy, but in a positive way. And then people respond with, oh my gosh, this is wonderful, this is cool, this is great.
This is an unprecedented time in education in the United States.
Standards in themselves, the total document, the next generation, has the power to influence all of the components of the education system.
See, normally we teach out of context. The biology teacher is teaching here, the mathematics teacher there, the English teacher over here. And then when it's time to synthesize, guess what? We aren't there.
The next generation standards are based upon research, current research, on how students learn.
Science isn't just a mere bunch of facts. You know, science is about the way we think about the world, the way we question the world, the way we communicate about the world. And that piece alone, developing that, is a huge piece of the new standards.
We're really looking at the next generation science standards to propel students into 21st century. So you're looking at college readiness, you're looking at career readiness.
Why is now the time for the next generation science standards? We're past the time for the next generation standards.
To be competitive globally, we need to prepare our students.
We have to have as a solid, firm foundation that framework for K-12 science education from the scientific community.
I'm one of the writing team members, and my job is to assist with the development of the standards, which is connected to the framework.
Minnesota is a lead state, so as part of that, I've convened together groups. We have some groups that are working as reviewers of the standards. We have two other groups, one that's sort of dealing with communications with the business and industry side, also looking at what it would take to implement the standards in Minnesota. And then another group who is looking at communications mostly with educators and especially around the framework document.
Our standards need to be able to help our students face a world that we're not currently facing right now.
We're never going to reach perfection, I don't believe, because the world is changing. We need to continue evolving and changing with our ever-changing world.
When a teacher loves something, the students are going to love it too.
Teachers have to be open-minded. They have to be willing to take a risk. They have to be willing to get messy. They're going to have to be willing to let the students lead a little.
This is it's a very hard thing, it's a very critical thing, but it's a very rewarding thing too.
It's awesome to see the kids working together and talking to each other and supporting what they think with evidence that they've seen. It is so major cool.
It's going to change the way that I teach, and it's scary, and yet at the same time it's exciting. I think it's going to reinvigorate my teaching.
I'm very excited to see that transition, that change to actually doing science.
The human capital is the most prized resource that this nation possesses, and we can ill afford the luxury of not developing it to its maximum capacity.
It's just a great little video to kind of share with you on the excitement of when the standards were released for NGSS. And so when we look at the actual structure of the standards, you know, if you think about all the information that was in that little short video clip, you know, now was the time to see an integration, that things were not taught in isolation. And so this is a wonderful connection of trying to pull it all together and trying to help prepare our students for jobs that we don't even know will be in the future. So as we take a look at the system architecture of the next generation science standards, this is what you will find when you go to the Next Generation Science Standards website and the current look of our standards in Kentucky. Really, Kentucky did a little tweaking to the NGSS standards to come up with the Kentucky Academic Standards for Science. And if you're familiar with NGSS, middle school was by content, it was not by grade level. And so Kentucky broke it down for middle school to really be able to see what's taught in sixth grade, what's taught in seventh grade, what's taught in eighth grade. If you look at kindergarten first, all those other grade levels, it's really still the same as what it is on the NGSS site. So you can see that we have the blue, that's the science and engineering practices, and that is consistent in both NGSS and Kentucky. The disciplinary core ideas is more of an orangey color. The green is your cross-cutting concepts. And so when you see that coloration, that kind of stays, consistent to kind of help us see those connections. The performance expectations kind of gives you a little bit more of a breakdown that's handy to have. And then there's also the connections. But something that I do want to show you is the difference this year. Back in July, the draft of the revised standards were released for public comment. And if you did not get a chance to look at them, there is a copy of the draft in your folder. So what you see on the right is how it looks in the draft form. You can kind of see the word draft a little bit darkened out there to the side. On the left is the Kentucky Department of the current look of the standards. And you notice it's broken down a little bit more. And so you may really like the look of these, but we're really still going to focus on the ones on the left-hand side, because could something still be tweaked and changed on the right-hand side? Yes. So you do not want to make use of those. You want to go to the Kentucky Academic Standards website, and you want to make sure that you're utilizing the standards they have posted there. Really, if you take a look, and if we were in person, I actually had copies for you to have a copy of one standard from the current system that we have, and then the draft, and the wording's the same. It's just it's taken away some of that busyness, and the connection section is gone, as you will notice on the right-hand side. So it kind of just, it's still the same content for you to be aware of. And so kind of help you to be ease fear of much changes. It's not really changing of what you're teaching, it's just changing the look of the standards for you. So right now we're going to take just a few minutes, and what you can do is you can pause our video so that you can have time to go through and look at an appendix. Now these are all found on the Next Generation Science Standards website, and they are very helpful documents. They have a lot of good information. I'm not saying it's something you need to look at every day, but it is something for you to be aware of. And as you choose one of these to read, I want you to think about how this impacts your teaching, instruction, and your assessments when you're teaching science. And think about what's the big takeaways when you're looking at these. So what you're going to do, this in person, we would have been doing a think, pair, share. So really this is going to go more to an individual thing for you, is you can take out your phone and use your camera and look at the QR code, and it should pop up to where you can click, and it will pull up your folder for this training so that you can select which appendix you want to read. Appendix E is more progressions, like with your disciplinary core ideas. Appendix F are the science engineering practices, if that's what you want to take a look at. And Appendix G is your cross-cutting concepts. Really and truly, you should probably take a look at all of them, but for the sake of the time, we only have 1 hour, and I think we're already about at 20 minutes with this to 30. So what we want to do is choose one, and I want you to think about how this connects to your teaching and skim those pages. But I also want you to scroll down in the document, and there's some really nice tables that show the progressions across the grade levels that we don't get to see in our science standards document on our KY standards webpage. So what I want you to do, pick one, hit pause, and then go ahead and take just a few minutes to go through. You might want to set a timer because you can get a little bit lost in those, but I want you to look at them and think about, how that those, what are your big takeaways from those? Now that you're back, try to think about how does this impact my instruction? Remember, this is three-dimensional. We're supposed to take the three-dimension of the disciplinary core ideas, the science engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts. And we're supposed to think about a phenomenon and connecting all of these when we're teaching. And so when we're doing that, this should, when you're looking at these three documents, they have a big influence about what we teach and how we're teaching it. I really love the science engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts because there's really not anything there that any content area wouldn't want their kids to be able to do when you're taking a look at them. So just remember that information is there on the NGSS website for you to be able to go back and look. Sometimes it's just a good thing to go back and review. Now we're going to take a look at, we've already visited the KY Standards website and looked at some of those. Now we're going to take a look at the KDE Science website. So when we click on it and pull it up, we can see that we can click on the academic standards, which is a great document that you need to make sure that you have at your fingertips. There's other information down through here, but over here on the left-hand side, it has the Science Standards resource. It does mention the Next Generation Science Standards page, the Science Assessment System. Now, if you're teaching 4th grade, 7th grade, or high school, it's very important to be familiar. I would recommend other grade levels take a look because that test, that assessment can be a little bit challenging. Another thing that was rolled out with the science standards was these through course tasks. When they first were rolled out, there was a little bit of hesitation with them because there were not many samples and we had to collect student samples. Not the case now. They're really just there as a nice little resource that you can pick out and maybe utilize in your class. So we're going to take a little deeper look at those here in just a second. And then there's also professional and curricular resources to be familiar with. So that's your Kentucky Department of Education website. Then you also have the KY Standards website that we looked at earlier, just pulling it up. Here you can see when you click on your science standards, it will download the whole document. You can get to it and just make sure that you're focusing on your level. Now, if being in person, I actually had a Jamboard in person that you could put a Post-it note on. But with this, I want you to think about, name as many reasons as why you think the state science assessment is so challenging. And what I mean by that is if you take a look at the data, science is the one area that has the fewest number of proficient distinguished students next to writing. And I believe science passed writing this in the recent history. So what's causing it to be so challenging? Well, one, it's new. But for those of you that are brand new to teaching and that you're not familiar with it, the assessment for some of you that's taught a year or two, when that assessment is rigorous and it really requires a lot of reading, a lot of analyzing, a lot of the science engineering practices are incorporated and cross-cutting concepts. And so that's not only pulling in the disciplinary core idea, but we're needing to pull in that three-dimensionality so that we're making sure that we are helping our students to be able to read, analyze data, and to get meaning from what we're reading. So keeping that in mind as we move forward, how do we prepare our students? Because that's something we want kids to do, not just on a state assessment. We want them to be able to do that anytime. Forget the state assessment. Don't say I said that, but we want our kids to be able to move out into a world and be very competent, being able to be good consumers and when we think about that, where are some samples of this kind of thing? So those TCTs that I mentioned earlier, if you take a look, and we'll click on that, like I said, you have a copy of the PowerPoint in your drive that you can click on these links, but you can also go back to the KDE webpage. So here we have the through course task. So these are handy. Now let me say this, do not try to do more than one a semester for the first time. Just do one, maybe in the fall semester, maybe one in the spring semester, because when you open these up, they're a little challenging. And so, but picking one that ties to something that you've taught is something to let your students have this experience is a good practice. Because when you start looking at some of these, you're going to see, well, everything's already laid out for me, but I would like to add this. That's the nice thing. You can add those things and modify these. These are just here as a resource. So as you scroll down, you can do a search by your grade level, which is great for those of you teaching kindergarten, because kindergarten's all the way at the end. So I would highly recommend doing that. If you have a certain topic you want to see if there's any, TCT on. Don't you love our alphabet soup here in education, all the acronyms, but your through course task. Now, here you can see that we can see the first grade ones. It does give you the phenomenon within the task. So what is it that we're looking at? So illumination affects visibility. We're looking at science and engineering practices. So planning, carrying out investigations, it lists those for us. And it also has cross-cutting concepts. So you can see that it's already pulling in those 3 dimensions for you. Now, these were developed by Kentucky teachers, and I'm not saying they're perfect, they're not, but it gives you something that already is made that you can take, you can tweak, try it with your students, and then, see how things work. And then we can always work to make the task better from the experiences we have with our kids. So if I click on, can you see what I see? It has the same breakdown on the cover page. As you read through it, it kind of tells you what TCT is. And it goes through giving you during the task, after the task. It shows you the highlighting with the colors that we talked about, science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts in their respective colors. Then we take a look. Here's a task annotation for you so that you can go through and take a look at what the expectation is with this. And as you scroll on, you'll see success criteria. And like I said, they're not perfect. Please keep that in mind. But it gives you something to work from to kind of give you an idea. And then here's the student pages. You can see the read aloud, and then actually has the handouts for you to be able to go and look at. Is this something that you give the kids to do individually, or is it something you work through as a whole group to kind of give them that experience? That's your professional judgment on that. But exposing your kids to something like this so that they have those types of things in their background to where they're getting this reading experiences. You'll go through a lot of these. You're going to see a lot of charts, a lot of graphs, a lot of data. So just take a couple of minutes, if you would. I'm going to let you go ahead and hit pause again and go take a look at your grade level. Now remember, they're there as a resource. Not saying they're perfect, but it could be something that you may choose to incorporate. And like I said, I wouldn't try to overdo it, but maybe try one, see how it works, and then go from there. Now that you're back with me, and you've taken a look at some hopefully TCT examples, this pretty much, after you hit the pause button and you take time to look at things, we're pretty much to an hour. And so I do apologize for taking any more time. But I do want to share with you, make sure that you're aware of that NGSS website, the Next Generation Science website. I am going to be offering a training later that will dive into this website a little bit deeper to give new teachers exposure to that. So if you're interested, please sign up. It's a free training that we'll be providing. But that's a good resource to be aware of. In the trainings that I mentioned, as of right now, the tentative dates are September 19th for grades K through 4. And that, if you're a new teacher and you're wanting just a little extra support, kind of going through those science standards for K4, that's what this training is about. October 10th for grades 5 through 12, same thing. If you're a brand new teacher, that's who this is going to be targeted for, not experienced, but new teachers. And so I do thank you for taking the time to join me today. I appreciate you listening and hope that you have a wonderful year teaching science. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can reach me at mary.belcher@hazard.kyschools.us. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful year.